Hi everybody, today I am going to be talking about wounds. I am going to be explaining the different types of wounds, the different types of drainage, the treatment for the wounds, the scarring, and healing process. So first we have a closed wound. A closed wound is something that the skin is not broken, it is intact, and usually it is a bruise or a contusion. And here is an example of that. Next, we have opened wound, where the skin is not intact. It is an open wound that you can see the underlayer of your skin, so not the epidermis, the dermis. First is an abrasion, which is the tearing away of skin due to friction. This does usually not bleed, and if it does, it is very little. It is also known as a scrape. Here's an example of an abrasion. Next is going to be an avulsion. An avulsion is the tearing away of tissue during an accident, such as a dog bite or a gunshot wound. The bleeding is usually very heavy. Here is an example of an avulsion. After that, we have an incision, which is a cut caused by a knife or glass if it is not in the hospital. The bleeding is usually quick and heavy, and it can be controlled in the OR. Here's an example of an incision. Then we have a laceration, which is an irregular wound made by the blunt tearing of tissue. This is usually a deep cut with very excessive bleeding. Here is an example of a laceration. And finally, we have a puncture wound, which is a small hole created by a sharp object. Depending on the severity, it can be light, moderate, or heavy bleeding. It can be caused by a nail, and this is an example of a puncture wound. The treatment for these wounds includes stopping the bleeding, cleaning and disinfecting the wound, either a dressing such as gauze and medical tape or stitches. In some cases, you may need a tetanus shot, or if it was an animal bite, you may need a rabies vaccine or shot. If the wound were to drain or get infected, there are 4 types of drainage. The first type is serous drainage, which is yellow or clear from the plasma in your blood. Next is sanguineous drainage. It is the bright red blood from a new cut. Next is serosanguineous, and this is a pink color. It is a mix between the plasma and the red blood cells. It can later on turn into sanguineous drainage. And finally, there is purulent drainage, also known as pus. This can be yellow, green, brown, white, and it can have a very nasty odor. This type of drainage usually needs immediate medical attention because it contains bacteria. Now, the healing process. First, your body will go into homeostasis when a wound is creating. Homeostasis means that your body knows something is wrong or something has happened, and it is trying to bring it back to normal. Next up in the healing process is inflammation, which is the fighting off of the bacteria or dirt or debris that is in the wound. And finally is repairing of the wound, which is the new formation of granulation tissue. This is the pinkish color of your skin after a scab has fallen off. And scarring is formed when the dermis is damaged. So there's the epidermis and then the dermis. The dermis has nerve and blood vessels in it, so when those are damaged, a scar occurs. The body restores collagen fibers to repair the damage, resulting in a scar. The scar tissue has a very different texture than the surrounding tissue. Here is an example of a scar. All right, and that's all I have today on wounds. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed my explanation of wounds.